kind of the same things. And I'm going to talk about essentially the process that I go through to find sponsorships, which I pulled together in December and immediately saw a doubling in the number of sponsorships I was able to fill and the income that I was making from them. So just to see who in the audience here has a podcast. I see a handful of hands. So I run a podcast network for software developers called devchat.tv. And we produce 13 podcasts every week. No, I am not the host on all of them. I always get asked that with wide eyes. No, I don't. I'm currently the host on about half of them, and I'm working to change that. So just to give you an idea, I spend most of my time doing a lot of the other administrative stuff. And by that, I mean I've delegated most of the administrative stuff. And I spend most of my time finding sponsors and kind of figuring out what the next steps are for the podcast network. So before the process, you can see that our average invoice for sponsorship was about $10,000. They usually signed up for about 8 weeks of sponsorship, and I had about 42% of my sponsorships filled. And afterward, you can see that the only thing that really changed was my fill rate. I doubled my fill rate. But I doubled it on some of the shows that are a little bit more expensive to sponsor because they have more traffic. So what changed? Well, for one, I started reaching out to more companies. And you can see that this is just your standard sales cycle, right? I reached out to more companies. They scheduled more sales calls. And I sold more sponsorships. And the other thing I did is once those sponsorships ended, I automated the process of renewing. And that's how I've been able to maintain that fill rate. So let's talk about this process. So the first thing I do is I send a cold email. I don't know where Rob went, but you remember yesterday when he said cold email is dead? And then he said, well, there might be some places where it's actually applicable. Yeah, Andrew pointed out, I don't know where Andrew is, but Andrew pointed out, yes, I'm that dinosaur, right? We make it by sending cold emails. And then the next day, we get on social media and we just follow them, right? So we follow them on Twitter. We follow them on LinkedIn. And then we send another email. Because if you send somebody an email and then you send them an email the next day and you're like, hey, did you get my email? They're going to spam you. They're going to put you in spam. But if they see your name come up and then they see your name come up again, then your name is going to stay in their head. Just like it did yesterday when I got the third email from Xander saying I still don't have your slides. And so his name stuck in my head. So then when I was running into Tropicana to make sure he got it, I ran into Brendan Dunn and I said, hey, Xander, did you get my slides? Yeah, and he gave me crap about that yesterday afternoon. You all can give me crap about it too, but yeah, right? So I had this name stuck in my head. I knew I was looking for Xander to give him the slides. And I ran into somebody whose face I recognized, and anyway, kind of funny. But anyway, so the whole idea is that you do some of the things that nobody else does, right? People are trying to sell to these folks. In my case, it's marketing officers, so director of marketing, chief marketing officer at a company that sells to software developers because that's who our shows reach. And so when I'm reaching out to them, by the way, it also helps that I'm reaching out to people who get paid to spend money. They see my name pop up and they can tell that I'm interested in what they're doing. And this is something that nobody else does. And so I think this is a combination mostly of doing the things that nobody else will do, making sure that they see you and recognize your name, and then doing the follow-up. And so then I send that second email. Hey, by the way, now that I've explained what we do and how we can help you, here are some other ideas of things that we can throw into this. And I get a 50% response rate on that second email. Right? Because they know I'm interested. They know what I'm offering. They know it's not a one-off thing, and they feel like they've seen me enough and know me enough to be willing to schedule that sponsorship call. If that doesn't work, then I go back in and I'll comment on a Facebook post on their Facebook page, or I'll reply to a tweet or retweet a tweet, or I'll leave a comment on something that they posted to LinkedIn. And what that does is, again, it creates that give and take, right? I've given them something. It's just a retweet, but it's that idea of reciprocity. Plus, again, they see me engaging with what they're doing and engaging with what they're about. And so the sales process isn't about outbound marketing, it's about interacting. And then when I send that last email, and this is the end of my sequence, the other 25% who haven't responded to one of the first two emails usually respond to that one. And then there are another 20% or so that never reply, which is fine. I figure they're just doing other things. So you have this process, right? And it all feels manual, right? I have to go in and I have to click stuff. And so when I said I automated this stuff, what I meant was, so I lied to you again, I go and click stuff. So the process is automated because I put it into HubSpot, and HubSpot prompts me to go do this stuff. It sends the emails automatically, but it doesn't go do the high-touch stuff. It only takes me a couple minutes per interaction that I do for this, and it gives me a to-do list. So I just go in and I just do my to-do list every day. But what that does is it makes sure that the process happens in the right order, on the right timing, and that's the automated part. And then it gives me all these statistics as to when people come back and start interacting with me. And you can see that the open rate on the emails is 76%. And there are 29 people currently in the pipeline because I put people in. I'm going to hire somebody to do that. That part is tedious. But the click rate 7%, and that's people who click the link to schedule the email. The reply rate's 24%, and a lot of times I'll get people to schedule after I reply to them out of band, right? So I probably schedule 30% of the people I reach out to for a sales call. And my sales calls conversion rate's like 80% because I've already done the work. I already know who they are. I know what they're doing. I know how to talk to them. I know what they're trying to do. I know who they're trying to reach. I know I can reach them. And so that part's easy once I get them on the call. But that's what I've done. I've just put it into HubSpot and made it easy. So let's talk about how I've identified the targets, because I think this is an important part. So we're going to back up. We're going to see how we get people in. And I have processes written up for all of this. Like I said, I'm going to hire somebody. That's how I'm going to automate it. I'm going to delegate it to somebody else. Do this. So the first thing I do is I find companies that market to software developers. I've already said that. And then I typically qualify them by seeing if they're spending money to reach people in another way, right? So if they're sponsoring another software podcast, if they're sponsoring a technical conference, that usually means that they're willing to spend money to get in front of developers. And that's a really easy sell because if they're sponsoring a podcast in my space, I almost always have a bigger podcast in that space. If they're sponsoring a conference, they're spending a ton of money to get people to travel out there. They're spending a ton of money to put a booth together. They're spending a bunch of money to get that space on the expo floor. They don't have to buy any of that when they sponsor a podcast, and I reach at least 10 times as many people for them. So I know I have a selling proposition right there. And then I also typically will look and see if there are people I already know at the company. Because if I can talk to somebody on their development team, a lot of times that's a really convenient way to get in the door so that I can actually get in front of their marketing people. Because they'll send an email over to their colleague that they go to lunch with every day that's not one of the developers. Hey, you ought to sponsor this podcast. I love them. And like I said, sponsors of other podcasts, I put people spending money at conferences and things like that, but yeah, podcasts are included there. So anyway, so here's how I find the people, right? Because I have to get their email addresses. Oh, we got the whole process up there. You can take a picture of this, or you can email me or text me. My email and text are at the end, and I'll just send them to you. Just text me your email address. But yeah, so I find I find the company on LinkedIn. You just do a company search. You click on the company, then you click on the list of employees. And then what you do is you can search the job title. So I just put marketing in there. And then I get the list of 3 or 4 people that I want to reach. And then I go to hunter.io. There was somebody here from hunter.io that I talked to the other day. So go find him, tell him thanks, it's a great tool. You can use it for free if you're only doing a handful of searches every so often, right here. But yeah, so I'm using it for free. I'm a freeloader and a liar. But yeah, so I put that in, I get their email address, and then I add them to the sequence in HubSpot, and that's pretty much it. And the whole point is to get them to schedule a call with me. So we get them on the call, and then I close the sale, and that's pretty much the whole process. But the thing is that if you sit down and you figure out what your process is, and then you automate it either by doing what the last talk was about with Zapier, or doing what I'm talking about and at least prompting yourself every day and being in the discipline of doing this stuff, that's a lot more than a lot of people do, and that will get you past the door of a lot of people.